Welcome to Forum at 360. I'm your host, Jeremy Hsieh. Joining us today is Clift, the Libertarian Party's candidate for governor. Thanks for joining us, Care.
Hi, Jeremy.
You're relatively unknown in Alaska, so why don't we just start by learning more about you. What's your professional background in?
Well, most of the time I've been a teacher. My most recent job, I retired about a year ago. I was with the Anchorage School District for 17 years, teaching special education.
Oh, wow. Okay. What schools did you teach at in Anchorage?
I started out with the preschool, which used to be at Mount Iliamna School, preschool special education, and then I moved to Chester Valley. I was there for 10 years at Chester Valley Elementary. I was at Lake Otis Elementary for 2 years, and then I retired from full-time teaching. And then I became what they call a rehired, and I came back to the Alaska Native Cultural Charter School as a part-time special education teacher.
Oh, interesting. So that must be a pretty different experience than from the traditional schools, huh?
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's a wonderful school. And the reason it works so well is because of the parent involvement. It is a charter school, so parents have chosen to bring their kids there. And they are required to put in some volunteer time in the school. But everybody is so willing to do that. You know, the events are so well attended. Every Monday morning, they have a forum for the parents that come in, and they have a guest speaker. So the parents hang around and listen to the guest speaker, and the kids sit there and listen to the guest speakers.
And is the student population there predominantly Native?
Majority Native. We have a lot of Caucasian, there's Black, there's even Oriental, Arabic. It's a school that people choose because they are tired of being in the neighborhood schools where they feel like their children are not getting quality education because of something that's different about the child. And they're not fitting in with the regular neighborhood school.
I think the politically correct term is usually Asian when you're referring to people, rather than Oriental.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So what's kind of the theme of that charter school then? What separates it from the public schools?
Well, the theme is that we're emphasizing the Alaska Native culture. For instance, when I was there, they didn't have a music teacher, they didn't have an art teacher. The regular classroom teachers were expected to introduce Native art and Native culture. We did have a Yupik teacher. That was the one Native language that we were using as a language that we were teaching. And that Yupik teacher also did a lot of art and music. It was just everything was integrated into the curriculum for Native culture.
And you're there full time now or part time?
I'm not there anymore.
Oh.
I retired a year ago.
Okay. And do you have a day job now?
No, I'm retired.
Okay. And have you ever held any other elected offices?
No, I've never held an elective office, except in the Alaska Libertarian Party as a board member there.
Okay. So you live in Anchorage, and how long have you lived in Anchorage for?
I've been in Anchorage for about 17, 18 years. I moved a little bit in 95 and a lot in 96. So, and I've been there ever since. Before that, we lived in Aniak, which was out on the Kuskokwim River. And I was there for 16 years in Aniak.
Did you move up here from the lower 48?
Yes, yeah, we've been here 35 years,
okay.
My husband and I.
Okay, and how did you become a libertarian?
It's just a natural fit. I never really fit into the two major parties, like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and it was something that was developed in 1971 as kind of a protest to the two major parties. It goes back to the individual. The individual is the smallest minority, and it's all about individual rights.
And had you ever identified as a Republican or Democrat in your past? And was there kind of an arc to get
No, I
there?
never really identified as, I would vote Republican or Democrat just like anybody else. Wouldn't I still do, But no, I never really identified specifically in a political party until I joined the Libertarians.
Okay. When you started describing it, I think a lot of Alaskans, a lot of people just in general, don't necessarily know what libertarian philosophy is in contrast to Republican or Democrat. Do you want to take a crack at defining what that philosophy is?
Well, our philosophy has to do with the minimum government, maximum freedom. And the other part of that is we have this principle where we never initiate force, which is, some people don't really understand that concept, but for instance, when you pay taxes, your government is forcing you to pay taxes. That's force. Okay, if you are, you're asking people to do something and you use any kind of force, then that would be against libertarian principles. So we are the original peace marchers, for instance.
So force in terms of physical force, but also just regulatory coercion.
Coercion, yes. Regulatory coercion. If you can be put in jail for something, then that's the use of force.
Interesting. Okay. So it seems like that lines up a lot with what regular Alaskans' politics are, Alaskans especially, compared to a lot of other Americans. We don't have any libertarian legislators. We haven't had a third-party candidate, third-party governor, but except for once in state history.
No, we haven't had a libertarian governor.
Not a libertarian, but a third party. I think.
We've had third
Hsieh
party,
at one point.
yeah, Hsieh. Mm-hmm.
What do you think the disconnect is there? How come the libertarian message doesn't resonate, or how come it doesn't translate into, more representation in government in Alaska?
Well, I think it does translate into more representation in Alaska. The libertarian ideals, the libertarian ideas, are represented in a lot of the things that Alaskans do. Now, we do have other third parties, third parties.
Third and fourth and fifth.
Yeah, right. And like the Alaska Independence Party, which is where Wally Hickel, he ran with the Alaska Independence Party, and many of the principles are the same. There's just a few things that are a little bit different between Alaska Independence Party and the Libertarian Party. One of them being that it was originally founded because they wanted Alaska to be independent, and no, we want to be part of the whole United States experience right now. But we believe in minimum government, so we don't believe the federal government should be reaching in and directing Alaskans. We believe in local control. We believe, like I said, the individual needs to be making decisions for himself. It's personal responsibility, individual rights. So everyone is responsible for themselves. And it really goes back to the whole Alaskan experience, where the rugged individualism of Alaskans, from the very beginning, everybody had, we are self-sufficient, we take care of ourselves. That's the Alaskan way. So it really goes way back. But the party wasn't founded until 1971. So you have to think about in retrospect, but we have had libertarian legislatures. In the late 70s and early 80s, we had libertarian legislators. And those legislators, the libertarian ones, those are the people that brought in the permanent fund, and they're the ones that got rid of the state income tax. So when people are looking right now at this bloated state budget that we have right now, and they're saying, oh no, we're going to have to bring back the state income tax, I think they should be looking back at who it was that got rid of the income tax in the first place, and it was the libertarians' influence that did that.
And so do you think some of those libertarian ideals have been co-opted by one of the two main parties at this point? Because
absolutely. Absolutely. We hear it all the time about libertarian Republicans, or, the Liberty Caucus in the Republican Party. And a lot of that, comes from Ron Paul, who in 1988 was the Libertarian candidate for president. But he was not as successful as Gary Johnson, who was the last Libertarian candidate for president.
So for this race that you're running for as the gubernatorial candidate, how do you distinguish yourself from, Sean Parnell and Bill Walker?
And there's another candidate.
And
There's
J.R.
Myers, J.R.
Yeah.
Myers, who's running with the Constitution Party he's running as an independent because he had to go through the petition process. And yes, well, all three of those are men, of course. There's one distinction. They're all very conservative, socially conservative men. All of them claim to be fiscal conservatives, as do I. But we look at it as fiscal responsibility, and I don't like to use the terms conservative or liberal, because I'm not conservative or liberal. Libertarians believe that there's two ways to be libertarian, which is you believe in the individual making decisions, or authoritarian or statist, where you think the government needs to make decisions for you and take care of you. We talk about the nanny state all the time. You want the government to take care of you. So libertarians don't want the government to take care of them.
Okay. And on social issues, you alluded to it, that the other candidates were all very conservative on social issues.
On social issues.
And there's a distinction there as well, right?
A huge distinction, because our philosophy is that, you know, like for victimless crimes, you know, if you are doing something that does no harm to anyone else, there's that force thing, it does no harm to anyone else, then the government has no business telling you what you can and cannot do with your own body, in your own home. They cannot invade your privacy for any reason, because you're not doing any harm to anyone else. The government's purpose is to protect people from that harm, you know, outside harm coming to them, and to, well, that's the main thing. Protect life, liberty, and property. Like private property is an important concept in libertarianism.
Okay, well, we'll circle back to some of those social issues. This November, like you mentioned, there will be 4 candidates for governor on the ballot. And right now you're polling at a distant third. One poll I read said about 3% right now. Meanwhile, Republican incumbent Governor Sean Parnell and independent Bill Walker are polling around 40%, pretty close to each other. Practically speaking,
well,
what do you hope to accomplish by running?
It depends which poll you look at and who paid for the poll.
Okay.
And this is a big problem for us, because, you know, we are a small party. We're not paying for any polls. We're not paying for a lot of publicity. We're not paying for a lot of advertising. So we cannot compete in a lot of ways. But, you know, that 3%, there was another poll that came out that showed Walker was ahead and Sean Parnell was at 24%. And something called Other, or Don't Know, was polling at 31%.
And you think you might be that 31%?
I think I might be part of that 31%. I know that J.R. Myers thinks he might be part of that 31%. So it's not, you know, what the polls show, in Alaska especially, the polls don't seem to mean a lot. Okay. Because they've polled before. And they poll 500 people, for instance. When I was in the primary election and 63,000 people voted for governor in the ADL ballot, and I get 16.5% of the 63,000 people that voted. I think that's a more indicative number than 3% of 500 people.
Okay.
So it all depends on the size of the poll, who has the poll, and if you've ever listened to any of those polls, they're push polls. You know, they'll say, well, you know, if this one was running and this one was running, who would you vote for? You know, and don't even give you the third choice, or if they give you the third choice, it's like, well, if they were running, then would you vote, you know? So they're always...
Would you disagree with the, you know, idea that you're 3rd or 4th place right now? Or?
I wouldn't disagree that I was in 3rd place.
So given that, you know, practically speaking, what do you hope to accomplish by running for governor?
Well, what I hope to accomplish is what we're doing right now, is talking about the libertarian ideas, talking about the libertarian philosophy, how do they apply to the state government. That's a really important piece. I feel like I've won already, because as far as that goes, you know, just getting my voice out there is winning. Just getting a few percent is winning. The way the Alaska ballot access is controlled, that 3% is a win for me, if I have only 3%. But when I looked at, like I said, the 10.4 thousand votes that I got in the primary, and I put that over all the people that voted for governor, in the primary, it was more like 6%.
Okay.
You know, I put the Republican numbers in too. And then when you put my numbers over the Republican and the Democrat numbers, it was 6%.
Okay. If you're just joining us, you're watching Forum at 360, and we're speaking with Clift, the Libertarian candidate for governor. Maria Rencel, the candidate for lieutenant governor for the fourth ticket, the Constitution Party, told APRN recently, from the very beginning, we don't have a snowball's chance to take the race. And it's really about establishing this party. So do you feel like you're in that same boat?
Well, our party is already established, but we also have the same challenge. We have to have that 3% in the election, in the governor's race this time, in order to keep our party status. So it is the same challenge.
Okay.
And we have not gotten that in a governor's race in many, many years. The record was set by Dick Randolph, who got nearly 15% back in 1982 as a Libertarian candidate for governor. And he's famous in Libertarian circles because Libertarian running for governor, nobody has ever achieved 15%. So it would be...
You mean across the country or just
across the country? No Libertarian has ever achieved 15% in a race for governor. So if I got to that, that would be awesome.
Okay.
That would be a win.
And with the Parnell-Walker race so close, it seems like a few percentage points either way might swing the outcome of the election. Do you see yourself as possibly a spoiler in this?
I do.
Yeah.
I do see myself as a spoiler. When Walker and Millott combined their campaigns, there were a lot of socially liberal or socially tolerant voters who were going to vote the Democrat ballot because traditionally a Democrat ballot is the only one who supported their social beliefs. And now they have a Republican heading that ballot. Although he says he's undeclared, a month ago he was a full Republican, and he has not changed his social outlook. And we have Parnell, who is a very conservative Republican. We have Myers, who is a very conservative candidate also. So then there's me. And I think that makes a huge difference in the voter's mind when they're looking for someone to vote for. It's very rare that the Democrat even wins in the governor's race. But I think it's going to make a big difference to people when they see who they have to vote for.
So if you're elected, what are your policy priorities?
Well, the sustainable budget is the biggest priority. And I think I'm in agreement with just about all the candidates on that. We have to get that budget into sustainable mode. We need to get it down to, my plan is to get it down to a $5.5 billion budget from what it is now, because that was when the last time it was sustainable. We know that the oil resources are going to be less. In fact, it went down to $70 a barrel just recently. So no matter what, if we don't get production up, if the oil companies don't get production up, we're going to have even less revenue coming in than we had last year.
And what's your prescription for getting production up?
It's not up to me to get the production up. It will have to be up to the oil company. I did vote no on one. My feeling on that is that a flat rate tax that starts out a little higher was a more predictable way of figuring out your expenses.
Okay, so you voted no on one, which meant you were for
SB 21.
Maintaining SB 21 as is, which was the governor's oil and gas tax rewrite.
Correct. But it is a flat tax, whereas the other tax under ACES was a progressive tax. It had progressivity. When the price of oil was high, the tax was high. When the price of oil was low, the tax was low. Now with SB 21, the tax rate remains the same. So no matter how much you produce, you will be paying the same rate, the same percentage. If you produce less, you'll be paying the same percentage, which is actually more than the low end of ACES. So it's a much more equitable way of doing business. It's much more business friendly, and it has nothing to do with whether I like the oil companies or not. But when people think about the fact that the people of Alaska do not pay income tax, but the oil revenues support 60% of our budget, you have to think about who are the taxpayers that we need to please here. It's kind of a strange concept.
You know, this kind of gets at the owner-state issues. You know, Alaska's been described as an owner-state because the state owns the land and much of the oil and gas reserves that pay for, you know, everything, almost everything.
Yeah, 60% of everything, right?
So, do you agree with that characterization of Alaska as an owner-state? And then, how do you reconcile that with
our
your
Alaska
politics?
Constitution did make it into an owner state. That is what it is.
And then how do you reconcile that with your politics if you know, the libertarian ideal is minimal government?
Right. You know, so you could say that that's a socialist constitution and that we live under a socialist system where the state owns the resources. The state runs the companies or whatever, but the state doesn't run the companies. Right. And I think in some ways, we are the corporate shareholders. I mean, that's the whole idea behind the permanent fund dividend, is that we are the shareholders in this state. But it should be run more like a company, not run like it is run now.
Okay. A lot of the changes I think you were talking about, you know, they just can't be done unilaterally by the executive branch of government.
No.
You know, you'd have to get the legislature to come along with you.
Not unless I was Obama, I could do it.
Executive orders? Well, there are some executive orders, I guess you could do. But as a third-party candidate, what's your strategy for working with the legislature?
Well, the great thing about being a third-party candidate is that I'm not partisan. In the legislature, they have Democrats, they have Republicans, but I'll work across the aisle all the time because in so many ways I'm more like a Democrat. In so many ways I'm more like a Republican. But every time I look at a bill, it has to be, does this advance liberty? Does this advance personal liberty? Or does this create a problem for somebody by banning something that they would normally do? We're going to cut regulations so that business has a friendly climate to operate in this state. And I don't believe in pork for certain areas. Again, you know, I need to look at what benefits everyone in the state, every individual in the state, not what benefits one region of the state.
Okay. So we've got 3 ballot questions coming up in November. How will you vote on raising the minimum wage?
That is a very easy question for a libertarian, and we are against the whole idea of a minimum wage.
Okay.
It's a contract between an employer and employee, and it should be decided between the employer and the employee what's going to be paid, and not dictated by a government. The other part that I really don't like about the bill is that it's tied to the federal minimum wage. So whatever we come up with here, if the federal government comes up with something that's a little bit higher, we have to have our minimum wage be $1 more than the federal minimum wage. And I don't like the idea of tying it to the federal minimum wage at all.
Okay, and we're running a little short on time here, but the other 2 ballot questions on how are you going to vote on requiring legislative approval of large-scale mining in the Bristol Bay fisheries?
I'm going to vote yes because my feeling on Bristol Bay is it's the wrong mine in the wrong place.
Okay, and then on legalizing marijuana?
I'm going to vote yes, but that is controversial even in the Libertarian Party.
Interesting. Okay. And I just got a couple minutes left here. So on some social issues, where do you stand on abortion?
I believe that the government does not have any place inside a woman's womb.
Okay. And there have been some efforts to try to nail down the definition of what medically necessary is for the purpose of federal, you know, accepting federal money and using it for Medicaid and some of those federal health care programs. You have any feeling on that?
Well, they did pass SB 49, which has a laundry list of things that could be medically necessary for abortion. Basically, it says no elective abortions. But my biggest gripe with SB 49 is that there was supposed to be an amendment, or there had been an amendment proposed that would add contraception for Medicaid, that it would pay for contraception, and they stripped that amendment from the bill before it was passed.
And you'd rather that was included?
I think it should have been there. I don't think the government, I think if you're going to help women, if you're going to help women who are in poverty, contraception is absolutely essential. They need that to keep from having more and more babies. And like they say in the old song, the rich get richer and the poor have children.
Okay, and the Affordable Care Act?
It's not a libertarian concept.
Okay. Would you accept federal Medicaid money in the
Do you mean
instances
the
where the
expansion of
government...
Medicaid? I agree with Parnell on that, maybe not for the same reasons, but it only lasts until 2016, and then it becomes the same as the other Medicaid that we're doing. So we're adding all these people to our Medicaid rolls, and then in 2016, we have to pay for it. And that's not going to work. Our budget's overloaded already. On top of that, there's a Medicaid payment system that was a payment system that was supposed to be designed and executed 4 years ago, and ironically enough, it's still not working after 4 years. And suddenly, it's important now to get it working because it's 4 years later. But Medicaid providers were not being paid under the system that we had. So how's it going to help to expand Medicaid when we can't even get our providers paid now? And I don't know where the money's going to come from.
Okay, well, that's just about all the time we have for this forum at 360. We've been speaking with Clift, the Libertarian candidate for governor. We previously sat down with independent candidate Bill Walker and his running mate Byron Malott, and we also have an invitation out to Governor Sean Parnell and his running mate, Anchorage Mayor Dan Sullivan, to join us in a future show. To watch this and other programs produced by 360 North, visit our website, 360north.org. Thanks for joining us.